Thundarr was way ahead of its time, and great stories.
His courage and his fabulous sun's sword against the forces of it. He is Thundarr the Barbarian.
The GOAT, the gold. Listen up, because I'm about to tell you about one of the most insane things that ever happened on Saturday morning television. In 1980, someone at Ruby Spears Productions walked into a pitch meeting and said, "What if we made Conan the Barbarian for kids?"
Favorite show you had that Ruby Spears produced for Saturday morning television? Studio produced. Thundarr.
But set it 2,000 years after the apocalypse, and somehow they actually did it. Thundarr the Barbarian was a post-apocalyptic sword and sorcery action show for children on network television in 1980. A barbarian hero with a magic sword fighting evil wizards in the ruins of destroyed cities. While riding through wastelands filled with mutants and monsters. This wasn't some obscure cable experiment. This was ABC Saturday morning, right between the cereal commercials and the PSA about not talking to strangers. And the creative pedigree on this thing was unreal. Jack Kirby designed the characters and worlds. The Jack Kirby, the guy who co-created Captain America, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the New Gods, a legitimate comic book legend doing character designs for a Saturday morning cartoon. Steve Gerber was the head writer, the guy who created Howard the Duck, one of the most innovative and weird voices in 70s comics. The show ran for 2 seasons, 21 episodes total, got solid ratings.
Lower ratings than Thundarr did.
Yeah, unfortunately, we were victims of those wonderful days of Saturday morning.
Kids loved it, and then it just stopped, canceled, done. No finale, no resolution, no continuation. Now, most people assume Thundarr was canceled because it was too violent or too weird for Saturday morning. And yeah, that's part of it. But that's not the whole story. The real story involves a show that was genuinely ahead of its time. A network that got cold feet about action content right when Thundarr needed support, and the brutal economics of early 80s animation that killed ambitious shows, regardless of whether they were actually working. This wasn't a failure. Thundarr succeeded on its own terms. It did everything right, and it still got axed. And honestly, that's somehow worse than if the show had just been bad.
Your chance, wizard! Now Thundarr strikes back! Out of me!
In this video, I'm going to show you 3 things. First, how Thundarr broke every rule of Saturday morning animation and somehow got away with it. Second, the creative genius and constant battles with censors that shaped what the show could be. And third, why ABC pulled the plug on a show that was actually working and what happened after. Let me take you back to 1980, when Saturday morning got genuinely dangerous. 1. Saturday morning goes post-apocalyptic. Alright, so it's the late 1970s. Ruby Spears Productions is trying to carve out space in an industry dominated by Hanna-Barbera. Joe Ruby and Ken Spears were actually Hanna-Barbera veterans. They'd helped create Scooby-Doo, which is kind of a big deal. But they left to start their own studio because they wanted to do things differently. They wanted an edge. They wanted shows that would stand out from the endless parade of talking animals and mystery-solving teenagers. So when writer Steve Gerber came to them with a pitch, they listened. Here's what Gerber proposed. In 1994, a runaway moon passed between Earth and the Sun, causing catastrophic destruction that ended civilization.
1994. From out of space comes a runaway planet, hurtling between the Earth and the Moon, unleashing
2,000 years later, Earth is a savage wasteland.
2,000 years later, Earth is reborn. A strange new world rises from...
Technology has become indistinguishable from magic. Evil wizards rule over scattered tribes of survivors, and one barbarian warrior fights back with nothing but courage and a magical sword. This was absolutely insane for Saturday morning. Nobody was doing anything remotely like this. The closest comparison might be Johnny Quest from the 60s, but even that was basically a globe-trotting adventure. This was a full post-apocalypse. Mad Max meets Conan meets the fall of human civilization. But here's what made the premise genius. The post-apocalyptic setting meant they could do literally anything. Want dinosaurs? Sure, they're mutants that evolved after the catastrophe. Want robots? Absolutely, they're leftover technology from the old world. Want demons and wizards? Magic emerged in the chaos. Want to show the ruined Statue of Liberty or the destroyed Hollywood sign? Go for it. That's just the backdrop now. The apocalypse was their excuse for everything. It gave them creative freedom that no other Saturday morning show had. And then they brought in Jack Kirby. Cannot overstate how huge this was. Jack Kirby wasn't just a famous comic artist. He was arguably the most influential visual creator in American comics history. His style was immediately recognizable. Chunky, powerful, explosive, larger than life. When Kirby drew something, it felt like it could punch through the page. Kirby designed the characters, the creatures, the environments, the whole visual language of the show. And it looked like nothing else on Saturday morning. The ruined cities had weight. The monsters had presence. The action had an impact. The main cast was simple, but effective. Thundarr himself was a freed slave turned freedom fighter, all muscle and rage and a moral compass that pointed toward smashing evil. Ookla the Mock was his bestial companion, clearly inspired by Chewbacca, but with his own savage charm. And Princess Ariel was a sorceress, the brains of the operation, and genuinely one of the most competent female characters in Saturday morning history up to that point.
Show you to the door.
Thundarr's weapon was the Sun Sword.
Now, beast, let us finish our fight.
Basically a lightsaber 2 years before lightsabers became ubiquitous, a blade of pure golden energy that could cut through anything. When Thundarr activated that thing and screamed his battle cry, kids lost their minds. The show debuted in October 1980 on ABC. The timing was perfect. Star Wars had blown up in 1977. The Empire Strikes Back came out in 1980. Kids were hungry for space fantasy adventure, and Thundarr delivered something that scratched that itch while being completely its own thing. Nothing else on Saturday morning felt like this. The show was dark, it was intense, it took itself seriously, and kids responded to that. But getting this thing on the air was a miracle, and keeping it there was going to be a fight every single week. 2. The creative tightrope. Here's the reality of making Thundarr the Barbarian. The creative team spent the entire run of the show battling broadcast standards and practices. If you don't know what that is, S&P was the network's internal censorship department. Every script, every storyboard, every finished animation had to go through them. And in 1980, they were not friendly to action cartoons. The rules these guys enforced were genuinely absurd. No punching humans directly, no realistic weapons, no blood, obviously, no death even implied, no excessive peril. Characters couldn't be shown in situations that seemed too dangerous or scary. Now think about Thundarr. The main character is a barbarian. He carries a sword. The entire premise is built around him fighting evil wizards in life-or-death combat. Every single element of the show was exactly what standards and practices hated. So how did they make it work? The workarounds were incredibly clever, and once you know them, you can see them everywhere in the show. Thundarr mostly fights robots, monsters, and magical constructs, things that aren't human. You can destroy a robot on Saturday morning. You can vaporize a magical creature. You just can't punch a guy in the face. The Sun Sword became absolutely key to this. It's not a blade, it's energy. It can slash through things without being classified as a realistic weapon. When Thundarr cuts a robot in half, that's not violence, that's, I don't know, science fiction imagery or something. The distinction is ridiculous, but it lets them get away with so much. The wizards get defeated, but rarely explicitly killed. They fall into pits. They get caught in their own spells. They escape through portals to return another day. You never see a body. You never see the moment of death. But the implication is there if you're paying attention. Steve Gerber and his writing team became absolute masters of implying violence without showing it. The apocalyptic setting actually helped with this. The world was already destroyed. Ruin and destruction were just the backdrop, the new normal. So when more destruction happened, it didn't feel like transgression. And then there was Jack Kirby's contribution beyond just the designs. Kirby's visual style had this incredible weight to it. When Thundarr hit something in a Kirby-designed world, you felt the impact even without graphic violence. The chunky character designs, the explosive energy effects, the dynamic poses, it all communicated intensity that the animation couldn't explicitly show. Kirby made the world feel genuinely dangerous without needing blood or death. That's a kind of genius that most people don't appreciate. Princess Ariel deserves special mention here because she was genuinely revolutionary for Saturday morning in 1980. She wasn't a damsel in distress. She wasn't there to be rescued. She was the team's magic user, their problem solver, and often the one who actually figured out how to defeat the villain of the week. Her spells were frequently more useful than Thundarr's sword. She wore practical clothing. She fought alongside the men. She had agency and intelligence, and wasn't defined by her relationship to the male characters. In 1980, this was progressive. Most female characters in Saturday morning cartoons existed to scream and get kidnapped. Ariel was something different, and kids noticed, even if they couldn't articulate why she felt special. The whole show had this tone, this atmosphere that set it apart. It wasn't campy like Super Friends. It wasn't slapstick like most Hanna-Barbera output. It played its premise completely straight. When Thundarr screamed, "Lords of Light," and charged into battle, the show treated that moment with respect. It wasn't winking at the audience. It wasn't embarrassed by its own premise. It committed fully to being what it was, and that commitment resonated. Kids could feel that the show took them seriously. So you've got a show that's creative, successful, unlike anything else on television, with solid ratings and a devoted audience. Naturally, ABC canceled it. 3. The Axe Falls Thundarr the Barbarian ran for 2 seasons on ABC. The first season in 1980 to 1981 produced 13 episodes. Ratings were solid. ABC renewed it. The second season in 1981 to 1982 produced 8 episodes. The show was still performing fine, and then it got canceled. No warning, no explanation, just done. 21 total episodes. That's the complete run of Thundarr the Barbarian, one of the most visually distinctive, creatively ambitious Saturday morning shows ever made.
The world's changed since they last saw it.
It'll be worse for them if the wizard shows up.
And it barely exists. So what happened? Why did ABC kill a show that was actually working? A few things all hit at once, and none of them had anything to do with the quality of the show. First, the pressure groups were at peak influence. Action for Children's Television, ACT, had been lobbying against violence in kids' programming for years. By the early 80s, they had real power. Networks were genuinely scared of them. ACT's main target was exactly the kind of show Thundarr was: action cartoons, heroes with weapons, combat as problem-solving. They didn't care about context or quality or how cleverly the show navigated the content restrictions. They saw a barbarian with a sword, and that was enough. ABC was getting nervous about any show that might attract that kind of attention, and Thundarr was a lightning rod. Second, the economics of animation were shifting. Costs were rising. Networks were looking for cheaper content, shows that required elaborate action sequences, detailed backgrounds, lots of character movement. Those cost more per episode. Thundarr, with its Kirby-designed worlds and dynamic fight scenes, was not a cheap show to produce. Sitcom-style cartoons with talking animals standing around having conversations? Way cheaper. You can reuse backgrounds. You can minimize movement. You can stretch a budget way further. Networks started favoring that kind of content. Action-adventure was becoming economically inconvenient. Third, ABC's Saturday morning strategy was changing. The network wanted to move away from action-adventure altogether. They were looking at softer content, more educational programming, comedy-focused shows that wouldn't attract activist attention. Thundarr didn't fit the new direction. It didn't matter that the show was working. It didn't matter that kids loved it. Thundarr was on the wrong side of that decision. If Thundarr had launched in 1983 with a Mattel partnership, it might have run for 5 seasons. It might have gotten a movie. It might have become the phenomenon that He-Man became, because honestly, the premise was just as good, if not better, but the timing was wrong. 3 years too early for the toy revolution that could have saved it. The cancellation wasn't about failure. I want to be really clear about that. Thundarr didn't fail. The ratings were fine. The audience was there. The show got killed for strategic reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with quality or viewer response. And then something weird happened. Thundarr refused to actually die. 4. The afterlife. After cancellation, Thundarr entered syndication. Cable channels picked it up, and it just kept running, finding new audiences year after year. Kids who missed it in 1980 discovered it in 1985. Kids who missed it in 1985 discovered it in 1990. The show became a cult classic in a way that very few Saturday morning cartoons achieve, and the influence spread in ways nobody expected. That post-apocalyptic fantasy genre that would explode in the 80s and beyond, Thundarr was there first, before Mad Max became a franchise, before every video game set its action in a ruined civilization. Thundarr was mixing swords and lasers in destroyed cities before it became a whole aesthetic. Adventure Time, one of the most beloved animated shows of the 2000s, openly cites Thundarr as a major influence, and you can see it immediately. Adventure Time is also a post-apocalyptic fantasy set in a world where the ruins of our civilization poke through a magical landscape. The DNA is obvious. Thundarr proved you could do genuinely weird, genuinely dark premises for children, and they would love it. That lesson influenced decades of creators who grew up watching the show. The He-Man comparison is fascinating and kind of painful. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe launched in 1983, 3 years after Thundarr. Similar premise in a lot of ways. Barbarian hero with a magic sword fighting evil in a world where technology and magic coexist. Sound familiar? He-Man had the toy line. He-Man had Mattel's marketing muscle. He-Man became the phenomenon that defined 80s action cartoons. But Thundarr did it first. Thundarr proved the concept could work. Thundarr blazed the trail that He-Man walked to massive commercial success. There's something bittersweet about that, being the pioneer who proved something was possible, only to watch someone else reap the rewards. Unlike some completely forgotten 80s properties, Thundarr still gets mentioned. Animation historians cite it as groundbreaking. Creators acknowledge its influence in interviews. It shows up on Best Saturday Morning Cartoons lists regularly. Warner Brothers owns the rights now through the Turner acquisition. There's been occasional talk of revival over the years. Nothing has materialized. Maybe someday. The property just sits there waiting. But here's what really gets me about Thundarr. 21 episodes barely scratch the surface of what this world could offer. The post-apocalyptic Earth setting was infinitely expandable. Every ruined city could be a new adventure. Every region could have different wizards, different monsters, different cultures rising from the ashes. The show had world-building potential for hundreds of episodes. The character dynamics were just getting started. Thundarr's past as a slave, Ariel's connection to the old world's knowledge, Ookla's people, and where they came from. None of it was fully explored. The show had legs. It could have run for years. It just never got the chance. The lessons. So what do we take away from Thundarr the Barbarian? First, quality doesn't guarantee survival. This is the hardest lesson. Thundarr did everything right creatively. The show was innovative.
Thundarr! Get him!
Visually stunning, well-written, and beloved by its audience. None of that mattered when the network decided to change direction. Sometimes the business decisions have nothing to do with whether the show is good. Second, timing is brutal and random. Thundarr arrived just before the action figure boom that would have saved it. 3 years later, with a toy line and a Mattel partnership, it could have run for a decade. But it hit the market in that narrow window when networks were retreating from action content and the toy-driven model hadn't emerged yet. Wrong place, wrong time. Third, influence outlasts episode counts. Thundarr only made 21 episodes. It ran for less than 2 years, and yet it shaped how creators thought about animated storytelling for decades afterward. The show's DNA is in Adventure Time, in every post-apocalyptic fantasy, in the very idea that Saturday morning could be more than disposable content. Sometimes a small body of work casts a long shadow. Here's the melancholic reality. Thundarr the Barbarian was the right show at the wrong time. Too early for the toy-driven action cartoon boom that could have sustained it. Too violent and intense for a network that was getting cold feet about action content. Too ambitious for the economics of early 80s animation that favored cheap and safe over innovative and risky. But here's the thing that I keep coming back to. The show won anyway, just not in the way anyone expected. Thundarr didn't become a franchise, It didn't get 130 episodes and a theatrical movie and a reboot and a comic book continuation, but it became legendary in a way that shows with 10 times the episode count never did. Every kid who discovered Thundarr in syndication fell in love with it. Every creator who cites it as an influence on their work, every best Saturday morning cartoons list puts it near the top. Every time someone references it as proof that kids' animation could be genuinely ambitious. That's the legacy, not commercial success, something better, actual impact that lasted. Lords of Light, sometimes 21 episodes is enough to change everything. Thundarr the Barbarian proved that Saturday morning could dream bigger, and that proof outlived the show itself. Thanks for watching, but here's the thing. Thundarr isn't the only ambitious early 80s cartoon that got cut down before its time. If you want to see another show that has this same combination of creative brilliance and brutal business reality, click the video on your screen. I'll break down another series that deserved way more episodes than it got. See you there.